Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to attend this virtual presentation today. My name is Mikaila, and I am a student biologist at the BC Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy. I will be providing you with the scoop on poop in your community, with a focus on the consequences of poop in your local water bodies, where this poop is coming from, what we at the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy are doing to help address these issues, as well as what you can do to help prevent the continued pollution of your community's waterways. At the end of the presentation, some additional resources for further information will be provided. Before we jump right into the presentation, I would like to first acknowledge that this session was pre-recorded in our Surrey office, which is situated on the shared traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish and Interior Salish people, including the Cutsey, Coquitlam, Kwantlen, Semiahmoo, and Tsawwassen First Nations, whose land I am grateful to work upon. So to start, you might be wondering, what is the issue with poop in the environment? Well, the poop problem is caused by the presence of harmful bacteria and other microorganisms, such as viruses, that are produced within human and animal waste. There are three related bacterial parameters that are used to determine if microorganisms from human and animal feces are present in the environment. The broadest bacterial parameter is total coliforms. Total coliform bacteria are commonly found in dirt, water, and human and animal waste. They are typically harmless and likely originate from sources in the environment. Then, within the overall group of total coliforms are fecal coliforms. Fecal coliform bacteria are normally present in the intestines and feces of humans and other warm-blooded animals, such as mammals and birds. Most fecal coliform bacteria are also harmless, and their presence serves as an indicator of human or animal waste in the water or soil. The last bacterial parameter used to assess if microorganisms are present in samples of water or soil is E. coli, which can be seen in this image on the left here. E. coli is one specific group of fecal coliform bacteria and is a common indicator of the presence of microorganisms from human or animal waste in the water. While many fecal coliform bacteria are harmless to humans, there are some bacteria and other disease-causing microorganisms in human and animal waste that can cause mild to severe illnesses. It doesn't take a lot of poop to produce large quantities of these bacteria either. For example, 1 gram of dog poop can produce 23 million fecal coliform bacteria, and in just one day, the poop from a single dog can produce enough bacteria to contaminate over 12 million cups of water. But we can't blame it all on the dogs, because a horse's poop produces twice as much bacteria. Overall, when fecal matter and the bacteria it produces get into the waterways, there are consequences to agriculture, as well as the health and well-being of humans, pets, wildlife, and livestock. Here is an outline of some of those harmful consequences. First, there is the impact to humans. Humans can become directly infected with fecal bacteria by drinking contaminated water or by swimming in water with elevated levels of bacteria. These exposures to fecal coliform bacteria can cause a variety of illnesses with symptoms such as nausea, vomiting, rashes, fevers, and respiratory infections. Babies and young children are especially vulnerable because they are much more likely to ingest fecal bacteria, as they may frequently put their fingers in their mouths and have yet to understand proper hand washing. Since their immune systems are still developing, children are more likely to develop serious symptoms and complications as a result of fecal bacteria infections. Our food supply is also impacted. Shellfish grown in contaminated water can accumulate bacteria and become unsafe for human consumption. Did you know that shellfish harvesting in the Nooksack estuary has had to be closed due to high fecal bacteria counts? Monitoring has shown that a large portion of fecal bacteria comes from the BC portion of the Nooksack watershed. Crops, especially those that are often eaten raw, such as berries and vegetables, can also become contaminated with fecal bacteria if they are irrigated with water that is containing the bacteria. Then there are the impacts to pets, wild animals, and livestock. Animals, including our pets, can also experience illnesses from infections of fecal coliform bacteria. Dogs can contract fecal bacteria infections if they ingest poop from another dog or other animal that is infected. While these infections can be treated with antibiotics, vet care can be expensive, and of course, no one would want their pet to be sick in the first place. Livestock can also contract fecal bacteria infections in a similar manner, and these illnesses can spread easily throughout herds. Lastly, having poop in our aquatic ecosystems can lead to an excessive amount of nutrients and organic matter in the water, which causes the oxygen in the water to be used up more quickly. As the oxygen is depleted from the water body, the habitat becomes less favorable to aquatic species. Particularly in Langley and the surrounding areas, this is important because increased nutrient levels in your waterways are harmful to important habitats of several species at risk, including the Pacific water shrew, red-legged frogs, Oregon spotted frogs, Nooksack dace, and sailor suckers. This leads us to the question of where this poop and bacteria are coming from and how they are entering the waterways. There are several sources where fecal coliform bacteria can come from. One place is from dog poop that hasn't been picked up. Another is the production of compost or the improper spreading and storage of manure. And lastly, there's the flow of water from land into nearby waterways and the leaking of septic systems into the ground. In general, any water on the ground will run into storm drains and ditches, all of which eventually flow into the natural rivers and creeks in the area, transporting any poop and bacteria it encounters along with it. If you live in Langley, Aldergrove, Abbotsford, or the surrounding areas, you are situated within the Nooksack watershed, which is shown here in purple towards the top left of the map. So, as I just mentioned, all of the surface water in your community will eventually flow into the local waterways, which in this case includes Bertrand Creek, Cave Creek, Pepin Brook, and Fishtrap Creek. Once these waterways cross the Canada-US border, they then flow into the Nooksack River. As you can see, the Nooksack watershed is quite large, meaning that any contamination in the water can have impacts far away from the initial source of the contamination. All the main waterways in your community that I just mentioned were a focus of a cross-boundary project between BC and Washington State that took place trying to reduce bacterial levels in these waterways, which in turn affected shellfish harvesting in Washington State. We found that all of these waterways had periodic elevated levels of fecal bacteria in them, and we were, and still are, trying to address these issues to prevent harmful outcomes from occurring on a larger scale throughout the watershed. To help address the issues caused by fecal bacteria in the waterways, there are several things that different groups at the ministry do in addition to the project I just described. We have environmental compliance officers who periodically conduct inspections of facilities and activities from many different sectors to ensure that best management practices, including appropriate manure and compost storage, are taking place. These facilities located in your community often include agricultural operations, mink and pig farms, and mushroom composting operations. These facilities are regulated by the ministry and may include permitted discharges into the creeks. It is up to the permit holder to test their own discharge water, but if a compliance officer finds that a facility is using or storing manure or any other harmful materials inappropriately during an inspection, they have several tools they can use to ensure that the permit requirements are being followed, including issuing monetary fines. We also conduct water quality monitoring of the water bodies in your area, with a focus upon US-Canada border stations on Bertrand Creek, Cave Creek, Pepin Brook, and Fishtrap Creek. To do this monitoring, we often partner with local environmental stewardship groups, such as LEPS. When we are conducting water quality monitoring, we use handheld devices with sensors that get submerged in the water to provide us with information about the general chemistry of the water, such as pH, temperature, and dissolved oxygen. We also collect samples of water from the water body to send to a lab where they are analyzed for the levels of fecal bacteria. In the past, we have also collected water samples that undergo DNA testing, which is called bacterial source tracking. The information from the bacterial source tracking is used to help us narrow down the exact animal species the bacteria is coming from, so that we can more easily pinpoint the potential source of this bacteria based on a particular facility's operations. As a member of the community, there are a number of things you can do to help minimize the impacts of fecal coliforms in the local water bodies, and knowing the rules surrounding poo that apply to you is a great start. First and foremost, if you are a dog owner, the easiest thing you can do is to pick up and properly dispose of any doggy doo-doo. Further, if you or someone you know is involved in agriculture or raising livestock, there are a couple of things to be aware of in terms of your storage and use of any manure you might have. For example, when storing manure, it is important to make sure that it's stored in a covered location where it is not exposed to rain, is away from any watercourses in the vicinity, and is not stored for longer than 9 months at a time. It is also important to avoid spreading manure during the rainy seasons or when the ground is frozen. These requirements, along with others surrounding manure, are outlined in the Agricultural Environmental Management Code of Practice, which is commonly referred to as the Ag Code of Practice. Next, if your property has a septic system, it's essential to ensure that it is properly cleaned, pumped, and inspected on a regular basis so that any leaks or other issues can be addressed to prevent the system from releasing your sewage into nearby water bodies. Lastly, if you witness any acts of pollution, report it by calling the Conservation Officer 24-hour hotline or by submitting an online reporting form. Because the pollution in Pepin, Bertrand, and Fishtrap Creeks is coming from many sources, it is vital for everyone who lives within these watersheds to do their part to reduce sources of pollution. It takes all of us working together to protect our streams for future generations. If you would like to find more information or resources regarding the prevention of runoff and the spread of harmful fecal coliform bacteria into your waterways, you can visit the websites for the Ministry of Agriculture and Food, the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy, and the Ministry of Health. You can also find the phone number and website to report acts of pollution here, as well as a community outreach handout with further information about poop in your waterways. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time and attention. A copy of this presentation will be made available to LEPS, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.